In question 31 of Prima Secunda of the Summa Theologica, St. Thomas Aquinas turns his attention to delight as related to the passions of the soul. This is the treatise that we're in right now. We're in question 31 of 48, and so still a ways to go with the passions, but this one has to do with delight. We all talk about delight, something is delightful, or we had a delightful lunch or a delightful conversation with somebody, but what exactly is delight? That's what St. Thomas Aquinas is getting at in these 8 articles of this question. And first of all, he asks whether delight is a passion, and since it does fall in the treatise on passions, you're probably thinking, well, of course it is, because otherwise he wouldn't be talking about it right now. He says the movements of the sensitive appetite are properly called passions. Now, every emotion arising from a sensitive apprehension is a movement of the sensitive appetite, and this must needs be said of delight, since according to the philosopher, delight is a certain movement of the soul and a sensible establishing thereof all at once in keeping with the nature of a thing. So what it is that when something is conducive to the nature of a thing, even a rock, laying as low as it possibly can, because of gravity, the rock wants to go down or fire wants to go up. So he would in some way describe that as delight when something is in a condition suitable to its nature. But of course, with human beings and with rational creatures or even irrational creatures, delight is going to take on the form of a passion because of the way that we are able to apprehend what exactly it is that we are delighting in, is what he's going to get at. But he says there is this difference between animals and other natural things, that when these latter are established in the state becoming their nature, they do not perceive it. Okay, a rock doesn't perceive that it's in the state of its nature. A flower or a tree doesn't. They don't perceive it, but a dog does, and a cat, and an octopus, and certainly a human being as well, whereas animals do. And from this perception, there arises a certain movement of the soul in the sensitive appetite, which movement we call delight, in establishing and keeping in the thing's nature. Okay, so when we are in a situation where something is established in our nature and it just feels right, or there's a certain pleasure that's associated with it, well, that's what Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas would refer to as delight. Okay, is delight in time? Now you might say, well, of course, this lady is enjoying a nice glass of water or lemonade or whatever, and that's in time, right? She's enjoying it in time. But interestingly, Thomas says we must say that delight of itself indeed is not in time, for it regards good already gained, which is, as it were, the term of the movement. But if this good gained be subject to change, the delight therein will be in time accidentally, whereas if it be altogether unchangeable, the delight therein will not be in time, either by reason of itself or accidentally. It's kind of hard to explain this, but I guess once you are in a state of delight, you're there, okay? And I guess in time you can continue to be in delight, but that actual feeling of delight in some way, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, is outside of time. Okay, does delight differ from joy? And what he's going to say here is that delight is a broad category. Joy is something that is experienced by a rational creature. Okay, so only a rational creature like a human being can experience joy. A dog or a slug or a butterfly can experience delight. We can experience delight from our sensitive appetite. We have a donut or something like that. We can experience delight in it, but we also can lift it up to the intellectual level, which would be joy, which only the intellectual creature is able to experience. All right, is delight in the intellectual appetite? He says certain delight arises from the apprehension of the reason. Now, on the reason apprehending something, not only the sensitive appetite is moved as regards its application to some particular thing, but also the intellectual appetite, which is called the will. And accordingly, in the intellectual appetite or will, there is that delight, which is called joy, but not bodily delight. So it's kind of like what we just talked about in Article 3. It's that when delight rises to the level of the intellect, it's joy. And so for the human being, delight would, I guess, coincide with joy in a sense. I don't know if you can delight in something and not have joy in it if you're an intellectual creature, but the irrational creatures can only experience delight and not joy, okay? Whether bodily and sensible pleasures are greater than spiritual and intellectual pleasures, I think you probably know where this is going if you've been going along with the Summa. Anything that has to do with the intellect or the will is going to be greater than the things of the senses. But Thomas is going to make a distinction here. In some ways, he's going to say the sensitive pleasures are greater than the intellectual pleasures. He says, in relation to us, bodily pleasures are more vehement for three reasons. First, because sensible things are more known to us than intelligible things. Secondly, because sensible pleasures, though being passions of the sensitive appetites, are accompanied by some alteration of the body. Okay, so even though we're intellectual creatures, we still are very much moved by the senses. Okay, it's just part of our nature. And thirdly, because bodily pleasures are sought as remedies for bodily defects or troubles whence various griefs arise. Okay, so he's acknowledging that even though, like I said, we're intellectual creatures, the senses are very, very strong in us. Article 6, whether the pleasures of touch are greater than the pleasures afforded by the other senses. And just to kind of summarize here, he's going to say that because things like eating and sex and drinking are related to touch, okay, you can't drink anything, there's no sex, properly speaking, without touch or food. These are so integral with not only the propagation of the species, but also the survival of the human being, that these are very, very important senses to us. But he says that the eyes and the vision has to do more with intellect. It's more of like an intellectual sense, I guess you could say. I'm trying to think of how he words this in the end. He says, it is to these pleasures of the touch that the natural concupiscences, such as those of food, sexual union, and the like, are ordained. If, however, we consider the pleasure of sight, inasmuch as sight is the handmaid of the mind, then the pleasures of sight are greater. Okay, so you can see those are the two greatest pleasures. Okay, are there any pleasures that are not natural? What he's going to do, and this is a very interesting article in the Summa, is he's going to say some things, even if they provide pleasure to a person, are what he calls co-natural to that particular person. So he's not denying that some people have pleasures that are unnatural. They might like to eat dirt, or they have made some kind of sexual pleasure that's not natural. And that desire is co-natural to them. So he's saying it's not that it doesn't exist, but what he's going to do is he's going to call it a corruption of nature. It's not natural to the species at large, but it may be co-natural to that particular person, but it is a corruption of nature because it's not in accord with nature or with reason in general. Finally, Article 8, whether one pleasure can be contrary to another. He says, yeah, it can. So one pleasure can be contrary to another. Okay, well, that'll do it. Those are the 8 articles on delight. I hope you enjoyed that. Hope to see you tomorrow for question 32 of Prima Secunda. God bless you.